It's the Congressional Corner, and joining us is Congressman Marc Molinaro, a Republican from New York's 19th District. He's in his first term. And a few days ago, Congressman, you joined with Democrat Pat Ryan, who's your Hudson Valley colleague and former special election opponent. You are both lending your support to a change for health care coverage for military families. What are you seeking?
Why must you remind us that we were a special elections opponent? It's like gives me post-traumatic stress.
What really? Was that it?
No.
It was a tough race?
Yeah, I hadn't heard. I'm just happy my wife survived it all.
And you got to keep running. I mean, you're in a job now that's pretty much always on the line.
Yeah, you know what? But beyond that, I think it's great to be out in the community responding to people, and I know why folks don't like these constant campaigning. But being in the community and campaigning means you're listening to people. But that's a different. The bipartisan bill that Pat introduced, and I'm very happy to be an early co-sponsor of, closes a loophole. Basically, in the private health insurance world, if you have access to health insurance and employer supported or others, your adult children can remain on your insurance plan until they're 25. Well, the federal veterans program, both active veterans and retirees, TRICARE, only allows you to carry that till I think 21. This closes that gap, and importantly so. These are men and women, without question, who have dedicated their lives in service to this country, both active and retired. And as importantly, many are traveling. Right? They might be moving from state to state. They might be moving from country to country. As your children get age up, we want them to not have to have the instability. And so closing that gap, allowing the federally provided health insurance to extend to adult children as private insurances do, and by the way, federal law expects for other health insurance. This makes sense. It's appropriate for veterans and military personnel, which who we have the greatest respect for, and it is a necessary next step to ensuring that kind of parity and stability for America's servicemen and women.
Are you confident that this will pass? I mean, where's the opposition coming from?
Well, there's over 60 bipartisan sponsors, Republicans and Democrats. As a standalone bill, it of course has cost, and so there's a consideration for how we come up with the savings, and we have to identify that as we proceed. I think there's an opportunity to get it adopted this year, but I'll say at the end of the day, it's more folks who are basically looking only at the expense without agreeing where we can come up with savings, and we have to convince those folks that we can identify the savings. The other is, as I said to you earlier, CBO scoring, and your listeners, probably heard that term more than most. They don't often look at anything but the base number. If you're providing longer term access to health insurance for adult servicemen and women family members, you're also closing what could be a mental health service gap. There could be, sadly, those who deal with substance use disorder. The insurance extending to adulthood, as we do with private providers, will also provide longer-term benefits that will provide actual savings to us. We don't score that. And so we just have to convince folks that this is a responsible approach to providing access and care to America's servicemen and women, adult children, as we do with other health insurance providers.
Let me switch gears to another subject that has really roiled your district and others in upstate New York of late, and that is the asylum seekers who are being relocated from New York City to a variety of counties. What is your read on the situation, and what is Congress's role here?
Well, Congress's role is to secure the border, provide actual security at the border, which we did with a streamlined and efficient asylum-seeking process, which the House of Representatives provided the president. Also, by the way, acknowledging that we need to do more to provide for protection for unaccompanied minors. Under this administration, there are 87,000 unaccompanied minors that we, the federal government, have lost track of. That isn't acceptable. And so we had a Secure the Borders bill adopted from the House. Maybe it's too conservative for Democrats in the Senate. That's fine. Negotiate out some solution to slowing entrance into the country for our own benefit, right? And ensuring the asylum-seeking process is streamlined and efficient while providing border security. That's an appropriate approach. it materializes in the 50 states and in New York, I just would say this isn't about lacking compassion. I, as a county executive, and even still today, want us to be welcoming to people from around the world. We ought to be a beacon of hope, opportunity, and liberty. And at the same time, we ought to have a process that compassionately cares for folks. When I was an executive and the federal government needed locations to site asylum seekers, we worked with the federal government, identified shelters. They transferred information so we knew who was coming in. We could provide them social services, access to education, and that was all done in a coordinated fashion. None of that has occurred in New York State, and that is both a failure of the federal administration and the state administration. And so allowing the city of New York to move people to counties upstate without any of that coordination, it isn't compassionate, it isn't progressive, it is cruel to the individuals, and it doesn't respect the real work that county governments are supposed to do to provide compassionate care to these individuals. And rather than simply putting people on buses, and I don't care if it's a Republican governor or a Democrat mayor, putting people on buses and transporting them across the countryside is just not, it's inhumane and inexcusable. And so what we say in New York is the governor should have acted sooner. Fine, we're past that point now. But there ought to be an effective communication between the city and others. There are counties and locations that are established and want to welcome asylum seekers. Let them coordinate that together. And the federal government, the president, should have directed federal dollars to provide direct assistance to the city of New York in the city of New York, instead of this very chaotic process, which frankly is going to result in losing track of more people and impact on service delivery of public schools, of Medicaid in upstate New York counties. And that may all be fine over time, but it needs to happen in a coordinated fashion. Lack of planning is not an excuse. And they truly have planned for failure in this case, and it's unfortunate because it's created both conflict and chaos, and that just shouldn't be. Given
the fact that tens and tens of thousands of these people have already arrived, and clearly New York City has its hands full, how would you go about fixing it, in real time?
Well, in real time, the president should have declared a state of emergency. The governor did, and instead of we don't know where the money's coming from, but instead of directing $1 billion to other parts of New York, you're asking what I would have done. Federal state of emergency, immediately moved to move more resources to secure the border and enhance asylum seeking process at the border, not within the 50 states. And then in New York, directing federal resources immediately to the city of New York to provide shelter in the city of New York. That could be use of federal properties. It could be use of unused state properties. It could be new federal assets brought to bear on the city. But direct them in that way. A failure to plan is a plan to fail, and that's what's occurred. But you'd almost, and I say this very respectfully, it's almost like this is what the federal government wanted. It's what the administration wanted. Let's just make this so chaotic that no one expects anything, and that is inhumane. It is unsafe, and it's inexcusable when you're talking about human lives. And so I know there are listeners saying, you guys, you should be less harsh and more caring. I truly understand this because I lived it. There ought to be a coordinated effort, and that coordinated effort could result both in better policy and a more humane way of treating both the individuals truly, genuinely seeking asylum and the communities that now are facing what is unnecessary conflict and chaos.
Okay, one more thing. Who do you like for president in 2024?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. What's that?
It was worth a shot.
I know. In 1948, two New Yorkers ran against 44. Two New Yorkers ran against each other. Tom Dewey and Franklin Roosevelt, both Dutchess County residents. We are going to have a very exciting field of candidates, I hope, on both sides of the aisle, and I hope America takes a lot of time considering the outcome, and I am, and I welcome the dialogue. I want the candidates to come to New York and earn the vote, and I'm going to celebrate that process and the result to play out over time.
Do you think there's another Dutchess County native son who might run for president someday?
I'm doubtful. Well, maybe, but it's sure the hell not going to be me.
Congressman Marc Molinaro is a Republican from New York's 19th District, and he's been in office since January. Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and our listeners.
You're welcome. Best to Alan and your